All right, y'all, so we are going to go through the do now very quickly, and then we'll jump straight into notes. So make sure your notebook's ready to go, and that you pay attention to this review of the do now in case you had any questions. Okay, this is a warm-up for what we're learning today. Find what's common in each term or part for the expression below. Here was an example. They all three had 4. Each part had 4 in it, so that was what was in common. So for this example, we have x's in all 3 of them, and that's it. So those 3 parts only had x in common. For this example, they all had 12, and they all had z to the second power, or z squared. That was what was in common with each piece. Okay, what is the greatest number that can go evenly into 6, 24, and 42? You should have gotten 6. 6 can go into 6, 6 can go into 24, and 6 can go into 42 evenly. All right, so now we're going to divide all 3 of these numbers by 6. That's what this part's telling you to do. So 6 divided by 6, that gives us 1. Then we have 24 divided by 6. That will give us 4. And then we have 42 divided by 6, which gives us 7. Okay, moving on to number 3. What is another way to write the following expression? So you could say this is the same as 2 squared times 3 times 4, which actually equals 48 if you simplify it all the way. For this one, we could say 2 cubed, because there's 3 2's, so 2 to the third times x times y. And 2 cubed, that just means 2 times 2 times 2. That's what 2 cubed is. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 equals 8. So 2 cubed is 8xy. All right, for this one, how many x's do we have? 1, 2, 3. We have 3 x's. So that will be the exponent. That's the same as x cubed. We have 2 y's. So that will be the exponent. And we have 3 z's. So we have z cubed. Cool. And we can't simplify that one anymore. Okay, what's another way to write the following expressions? 4 over 4, that is the same as 1. Okay, let's see. This one we could simplify by crossing out common things on the top and the bottom that are being multiplied. So like these are all being multiplied, that's why we're allowed to cross out. So we could cross out one of the 4's, we could cross out one of the 6's, and that leaves us a 2 times a 6 on top over. When you cross everything out on one of these sides, what's left? When you cross all the pieces out, 1. 1 is left. So this is the same as 2 times 6, which is 12 over 1. And then anything over 1 is just that thing that you started with, so that equals 12. All right, let's do this one the same way. So we can cross out one of the x's, another one of the x's. We can cross out a y, and there is no z on top. So that leaves us with x times y on top over z on bottom. And if we were to simplify this, we would say this is x squared y over z. You may have done this a little differently. If you did, awesome. Okay, we're going to move into notes. So again, you should have your notebook. You should be ready to write down notes. You should be ready to go. Okay, oops, sorry about that. Let's get back to where our notes started. Okay, so today in the top of your notebook, I want you to write the title of today's lesson, which is right here, 0.1 notes, greatest common factor, very quickly. And we're going to go fast. We are going to start with the standard form of a quadratic, but first let's make sure we know what is a quadratic. So write this down. A quadratic is an equation that has x squared as the highest exponent, or highest power of x, exponent on x. So x squared, or 2, you could think of it as 2, is the highest exponent on x. Okay, and now let's write down the standard form of a quadratic. This should look familiar. We have ax squared plus bx plus c. That is the standard form of a quadratic. Okay, today we're going to learn the first step of factoring a quadratic, which is factoring a greatest common factor. So make sure you write this down. Factor a greatest common factor, and we will start calling the greatest common factor the GCF, because it's just faster to call it that. Okay, so we will be factoring out a GCF today, and here's your first example. Make sure you write this example down all the way. So write that example. Factor f of x equals 4x squared plus 8x. Then find the zeros, roots, solutions, x-intercepts. Why are these all next to each other? Because they are all the same thing. So I want you to write that down. Zeros, roots, solutions, x-intercepts, they're all the same. SAT likes to use different words to try to confuse y'all, but you will not be confused because you will know that zeros, roots, solutions, and x-intercepts are all the same. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to go back to like standard form, and we're going to remember just like how do I know this is a quadratic? Because x squared is the highest exponent on x. And then let's just write down a, b, and c just to make sure we like know what we're looking at here. So a is the letter, or the number that's on x squared. So a will be 4. A equals 4. This isn't factoring. We're not factoring yet. We're just writing this down. B is the letter that's on x. So b equals 8. We're just kind of like remembering what we've already learned. Cool. And then c is the letter or the number that's out in front. So c right here, what number, or sorry, out on the side, I guess. What number is being added outside? Plus, that's a 0. So c equals 0. Nothing's being added outside. Okay, now let's talk about how to factor out a GCF. So to factor out the GCF, you're going to factor out the largest, sorry, I lost my pen. There we go. Factor out the largest number, and or the smallest exponent. And variable. Variable just means letter. So we're going to factor out or take out the largest number that goes into all parts and the smallest exponent that goes into all parts. So let's start. Let's go ahead. I'm going to write what we started with. So we have f of x equals 4x squared plus 8x. We don't need the plus 0. Okay, now let's factor out the largest number that goes into all terms. So what is the biggest number that goes into these numbers? 4. 4 can go into 4. 4 can go into 8. That's the biggest number that goes into both 4 and 8. Now we need the smallest exponent. Okay, so think of it as there's 2 x's here and there's 1 x here. Which one's smaller? 2, or we could put a little 1 there. 1 is smaller, right? So we can take 1 x out. So we're going to take x, and you could put a little 1 there to represent that we took 1 x out. This is your GCF. We factored that out in front. Now we need to write what is left. So let's write what's left if we factor. So factoring is the same as dividing. Factoring is the same as dividing. So we need to divide these numbers by the number that we took out. So what is 4 divided by 4? 1. And then think of this as we started with 2 x's on this 4. We started with 2 x's. We took 1 away. So how many x's are left? 1. Don't forget your plus sign. Always bring your operation sign down. Then, remember, factoring is like dividing. We factored out a 4. We need to do 8 divided by 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. We started with 1 x on the 8. We took 1 x out. So are there any x's left? No. That is what is left after we factor out the GCF. So let's go ahead and write that whole thing now. We have 4x squared, or sorry, 4x, and then do I need the 1 right here? 1x is the same as 1 times x. 1 times x is just x. X to the 1, that's just x. So we have 4x, we don't need the 1 exponents, times x plus 2. Okay, and now let's make sure we know what are we looking at. These things, here I'm going to put them in green. These two pieces, make sure you write this down because this is important for the mastery check. These two pieces are called factors. They're the two pieces that multiply together. See, there's multiplication right here. They multiply together to give you what you started with. So let's check that we factor correctly by multiplying really quick. So if I multiply this in, I should get what I started with. 4x times x, that would be 4, and then we do x times x, that gives me x squared, 4x squared. Bring the plus sign down, plus 4x times 2. 4 times 2 is 8, and then we have an x. Is that what we started with? We started with 4x squared plus 8x. If we multiply our factors together, we get 4x squared plus 8x. So that's how you know you did it right. You factored correctly. Okay, the last thing we need to know is how to find the solutions or the zeros. So write this down, find the zeros, and then know that zeros is the same as solutions. Remember, we just took a note on that. X-intercepts and solutions, x-intercepts, and roots. Those are all the same thing. Zeros is the same as solutions, x-intercepts, and roots. So you find the zeros by setting each factor equal to 0. That makes sense. Find the zeros by setting it equal to 0. And then you solve for, what do we always solve for? We always solve for x. So you solve for x. Okay, so let's take each factor. Remember, these green things are the factors, these two things. So let's take each factor, 4x, x plus 2. Those are our factors. We're going to take each one and set it equal to 0. So we're going to do 4x equals 0. And then we're going to do x plus 2 equals 0. And now we need to solve for x. Solving is the same as saying isolate. So we're going to isolate x. So we have 4 times x here. That operation's multiplication. To isolate x, we do inverse operation. So we're going to divide by 4 to get that 4 to go away. And then we get x equals 0 divided by 4. 0 divided by 4 is 0. So x equals 0. That is one of your zeros. Remember, we're trying to find the zeros, or the solutions, x-intercepts, roots. Okay, now let's do this next one. So we set it equal to 0. We set the factor equal to 0. Now we need to isolate x by inverse operations. So we have plus 2 over here. We got to do the opposite. So let's subtract 2 on both sides. Those go away. We get x equals negative 2. Because 0 take away 2 is just negative 2. All right, that is your second 0. Oops, kind of cut off the 2 there. Negative 2. Okay, so now we're going to do one more problem before going into a more extended practice. This one's going to be your practice problem though, so get ready. But it looks a little bit different, so let's really quick talk about how it looks different before I get you to try it on your own. So here we had f of x equals 4x squared plus 8x, right? Now we have 6x squared equals negative 3x. Something looks different. Do you see how we have things on both sides of the equal sign here? You always want to get everything to one side. So let's put a note here. Always get all pieces to same side of equal sign. Okay. Always get all pieces to the same side of the equal sign. So what we're going to do is we're going to start this problem by moving something to the other side of the equal sign. Here's a tip. Always keep your x squared positive. So we don't want to move the 6x squared because the 6 is already positive. So that's good. Don't mess with that. We do want to move this thing, this term, over to the other side. So the way we're going to do that is inverse operations. We will do plus 3x on both sides, plus 3x on both sides. This side will turn it into 0. So now we have 0 on this side. The equal sign comes down. Can we combine these? No, we cannot, because the exponents aren't the same. You can only combine the terms if the exponents are the same. What's the exponent on this x? If there is no exponent, the exponent is 1. So they're not the same, so we can't combine them. So you just write them separate. 6x squared. Let me erase that. I'm going to run out of room here. So we have 6x squared plus 3x equals 0, because we cannot combine the 6 and the 3, the x squared and the x. Okay, so now it's your turn. I want you to try to take this. So we're starting with 6x squared plus 3x equals 0, and try to factor this left-hand side. Try to factor this side, take out a GCF first, and then see if you can get the solutions or the zeros. Okay, so now that you've tried on your own, it's time to check, did you do it right? So the GCF, remember, we're going to take the largest number that goes into both numbers out. So what is the biggest number that goes into 6 and 3? The biggest number that goes into 6 and 3 is 3. So we're going to take that out in front. We're also going to take the smallest number of x's. So this one has 2. This one has 1. Which one's smaller, 2 or 1? 1. So we're going to take 1x out. Take 1x out. Okay, then we close our parentheses. Oh, sorry, that's supposed to be a parentheses. We close our parentheses and we divide now. So we started with 6. We started with 6. We need to divide by 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And then we had 2 x's in the first place with the 6, but we took 1 away. So 2 take away 1, you only have 1x left. Bring down your plus sign. Now we take the 3. We started with 3. We divide by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. We started with 1x. We took 1x away. So there are no more x's left here. Close the parentheses. Bring down the equal sign. Bring down the 0. Sweet. So this is the fully factored form. This is called the GCF, the greatest common factor. It is a factor, right? Because it's called the greatest common factor. This is also a factor. Okay, now let's see if you got the zeros. If you got the zeros. Actually, try to get the zeros real quick. What are the zeros? If you didn't already get them, now try to get them. Find the solutions or the zeros. Okay, so you should have tried to find the zeros. The way we do that is we take each factor. These are the factors. Take each factor and you set them both equal to 0. And then you solve for x. So for this one, to isolate x, we're going to divide by 3 on both sides. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. The 3's cancel out. We get 0 divided by 3. That's just 0. So x equals 0. All right. Then we're going to take 2x plus 1. For this one, you always need to do what is outside of the multiplication. So like this is multiplication, so we can't do that yet. Do addition and subtraction first. Inverse operations. So minus 1, minus 1. We get 2x equals 0 minus 1 is negative 1. Now we need to deal with that multiplication. What's the opposite of multiplication? Division. Divide by 2. Divide by 2. Cross those out. We get x equals negative 1/2. And y'all, you may have wanted to convert that to a decimal, but I do not like decimals. I know it's super cool to be able to convert, but since we're in algebra now, and since in college you're supposed to use fractions, we're just going to leave that as a fraction. So x equals negative 1/2. All right, that was notes. Great job. Now we're going to go into some practice.